In this video, we're going to take a look at voice of customer interview techniques. And in particular, the learning objectives will be to differentiate between voice of customer interviews used for qualitative data collection and surveys, a technique for quantitative data collection. We'll take a look at the overall goals and objectives of voice of customer interviews. And then we'll focus in on a planning checklist that you can use for VOC interviews using a before, during, and after approach to help make for more successful outcomes from your VOC interviewing. If VOC interviews are done well, there is a huge laundry list of things that will be beneficial for the team. They include, you'll get a list of the pain points of current state. Part of the goal of the defined phase for a DMAIC style project is an understanding of current state performance. And we'll be asking important stakeholders, tell me what is frustrating or broken in the process. You'll get that list of frustrations in current state. But if done well, a VOC interview will also give you understandings of what the needs are in future state. Where do we need to move performance to? This could include things like what does the future state performance specification need to be? What are some of the requirements that you're looking for in future state? And it may even include some of the solutions that those important stakeholders are looking for. More on how you manage those possible solutions later. But I think a couple of the biggest, most important reasons why VOC interviews are so powerful are because of the ability that VOC interviews have on helping the team increase goodwill for the initiative. Look, sometimes there's going to be resistance to changing to a different way of doing work. And while there might be benefits to that future state improvement, there will always be some folks that will be concerned that the changes that might be required of them might be too great. There's also frequently in process improvement work a concern that this isn't about improving the process. This is just about punishing the process workers that are part of the process. And so these interviews help you to frame how this project is really about data-driven problem solving, and it helps to reduce that resistance that you see frequently in process improvement projects. The most important part of a VOC interview is that it helps increase the knowledge level of your process improvement team members. Frequently, team members are chosen because they're experts at their particular step in the process, but they don't understand the whole system. After completing VOC interviews, your team members' knowledge level about areas outside of their own expertise increases dramatically. And then the sharing that takes place with the whole team after these interviews helps to give everybody an enterprise-wide system view. So now that we have a good understanding of what a VOC interview is and what are some of the goals and objectives of a good VOC interview, how do you lead your team to successful outcomes? I like to use this VOC planning checklist. And I'm going to zoom in on the before, during, and after checklist items. The checklist is on the course materials website, and I'll have links to it in the bottom of this video as well. Let's take a look at things that you need to prepare before you go out and interview these most important stakeholders. Before we go out and do the actual interviews, I like to meet with the team and to go through the following items. If we haven't done a stakeholder analysis where we've identified a broad list of our most important stakeholders and then refined it down to the vital few that we want to go out and interview, we'll want to make sure that we've done that. There is an earlier video on stakeholder analysis, especially the identification and prioritization that can help you with this. You're going to want to make sure that the team comes up with a common list of questions to ask. Build questions that are common across all stakeholder groups, but then also build some questions that are unique for the particular stakeholder or subject matter expert that you're going out to interview. Build those questions in advance. And here's a tool that can help you with this. On the course materials website and at the bottom of this video, I've got a link to an already prepared Excel spreadsheet that has over 200 already built questions that you might want to consider for a VOC interview. Let me give you a quick snapshot at what that looks like. This is a snapshot of that interview questions spreadsheet. You can see down at the bottom, there's 15 different worksheet tabs. Each of the tabs breaks questions down into different category types. This is just a fraction of the questions available. Use that to help the team in crafting the questions. A few other things to consider before going out and performing these interviews. Make sure that you've got a strategy or a plan for how your team members are going to be assigned to do these interviews. Sometimes I'll have team members interview individuals that they're already familiar with. Sometimes I like to do that because then a trust relationship has already been set up at the beginning of the interview. The team member and the subject that's being interviewed already has a comfort level with each other. But on occasion, I'll like to have team members interview areas of the process that they're unfamiliar with. As I'm building out that strategy for which team members are interviewing which stakeholders, I also like to make sure that we've figured out the roles and responsibility of each team member. I like to have them go as pairs so that one can act as interviewer and the other can act as record keeper, timekeeper. Plus, by having pairs, you have 4 sets of ears that are listening, not just one person that's listening, that where you can have lost in translation results. I just want to make sure, though, that everybody has a clear understanding of their roles and responsibilities for the interviews. Finally, in planning, I like to also make sure that we've got all of the support documents ready to go for these interviews. In particular, things that I almost always bring to a voice of customer interview include I find that at the beginning of interviews, if I can share with my interviewee a picture of the process, that can really help focus and frame the discussion. I also find that by having a goal statement, having the goal statement nearby, that can help interviewees help clarify whether or not our goal statement is actually addressing some of the pain points and frustrations that they're looking for. Goal statement refinement is a frequent after activity from these VOC interviews. All right, let's take a look at some of the things that happen during the voice of customer interview. And just a quick side note on where these interviews are taking place. I prefer the interviews to happen where the work is being performed by the interviewee. That way, if they want to share an example or point out a particular frustration, we can see it in real time. During the interview itself, one of the first things that we'll do before we actually dive into the questions is we'll try to frame the conversation. And we talked earlier about the use of process maps to help make sure that everybody's on the same page for what this interview is about and not about. I want to make sure that they understand that that it's okay to share problems, that this is a focus on trying to improve the process, not to place blame on the process workers. Don't always assume that the interviewee will want to share everything that's broken about this process with you until you've created that trust. Some of the support docs, including process maps and goal statements, and maybe the project charter is shared up front right away. Keep the use of those support docs at to what they should be intended for, and that is to make sure everybody's on the same page. When I'm actually doing the interview questions, I know that not every stakeholder is going to have detailed experiences or answers to some of those questions. So a stepladder approach is the technique that I use. There are some support articles on the stepladder interview technique, but in essence, it's ask the base question. If then the interviewee has deeper meaning, you begin to step up some of the more detailed questions related to that topic. If they don't have deeper meaning, then we'll move on to the next set of questions. It shouldn't be an inquisition in which you make the interviewee feel like they don't know what's going on. Use step-ladder interviewing techniques to help speed up the interview and create comfort for the interviewee as well. All of these interviews are going to include some questions around what is current state performance like? Tell me what some of the frustrations are in current state, and then tell me some of the needs that you have in future state. What's the performance need to be at in future state for those frustrations to go away? So it's always at least a current state and future state analysis focused on performance in the system. Couple of pro tips about common issues. Sometimes you're going to have interviewees that after describing what is broken, they're going to immediately want to describe those solutions that they think will improve performance. And I actually write down their possible solution in a special document that I bring to these interviews called I'll record each of their possible solutions in this document and remind them that we'll be looking back at these possible solutions once we've determined root cause, and that'll happen in the improve phase of a DMAIC-based project. Be careful of an uneven balance of authority if you're interviewing a group of people. What I mean by this is if you've got a supervisor and then specialists that are all in the room, sometimes there's a tendency for everybody in the room to defer to that person of authority. And be careful of the recording tools that you use. I'll always take notes or have a team member take notes while another person is asking the questions. But use of recording devices, video or audio recording, sometimes is prohibited depending upon the workplace environment. And there isn't that much gain of efficiency in using these tools because you'll still have to go back through your recording and take notes on some of the key thoughts because you're going to share the results of these interviews with your team members later. So recording, be careful of. After your VOC interview is done, there are a couple of follow-up items. After I'm done with an interview, I frequently am asking for that interviewee to share some examples with me of some of the frustrations or errors or issues in current state. And I'll use my camera phone to take photos. It's also a great time to do a process walk when appropriate, especially if the work is visual that for the site location that I'm interviewing. I might do a lean waste identification exercise using the Tim Woods approach. When I get back to my team environment, it is critical to share the results of this interview with the team. It's that knowledge sharing that is one of the most important aspects of a VOC interview. Sometimes it can be informal, where I'll just ask each of the team members to describe the insights that they gained from the interview, and we'll just go round robin style. Other times we'll go systematically through each question, and I'll have each team member who interviewed different people report on those question results. After that knowledge has been shared, there are probably some updates that will need to happen. It could include updates to the process map. Frequently, after interviewing these stakeholders, we realize that there are gaps in what our process maps are describing, or we'll be taking our high-level process map and converting it into a detailed process map. More on that in the video on detailed process mapping. We may need to convert some of the vague VOC statements that were recorded into more measurable CTQs. And again, we have a video on how that is performed. There could be some cost-benefit analysis updates that we need to make, and we almost always have to update our possible solution list with all of the solutions that our different stakeholders have given us. On occasion, it could also mean that we're refining our goal statement, which could mean we're changing some of the scope of the project. If we change scope or update the project charter, though, be careful. That's not something that you do just with the team. You also need to make sure that your sponsor is on board with that. Well, there you have it, a quick rundown on the before, during, and after activities that are commonly performed for VOC interviews. They're one of the most powerful qualitative data collection tools and techniques available. They give us great insight into current state performance and future state needs.